Hello and welcome to week 5 of Transformation Dynamics Summer Briefing Series. The topic today is migration dynamics, moving from the traditional business or traditional business model to SaaS or cloud-based business models. That is the topic of today. And many businesses are facing a real issue coming from the old or traditional world of business applications and traditional business models, and they see a growth flattening or even declining. And so the question that is asked always, what should we make out of this? How much time do we have? Is there any hope that we can still grow the business? Do we need to fear that it's declining, or are we even facing a nightmare situation with a rock sliding decline of the customer base and, of course, the revenue associated to this? And the key question is, of course, what is driving these key scenarios? So what would be the most likely outcomes? What would be potential futures for the customer base if we don't do anything, or if we take action and move towards a new and modern business model? And for example, software companies are facing these issues when they're moving to subscription-based business models, which has quite different dynamics, as we will see during the talk today. So what I'm planning today is to work with you on a couple of key scenarios, and I'll be using a simulation that I have prepared for this topic. And the simulation has what I call the dashboard or management flight simulator, so we can play with that a little bit, but only, again, to introduce the topic and the key dynamics. In preparation is also an online simulation tool, pretty much to this one, which was published for the market dynamics session that I gave a couple of weeks ago. So this webinar is a free webinar that you can watch either on the YouTube channel or on the webinar session. And only in the webinar session we have the specials, which I will cover in a minute. There is also an extended course available, which includes group coaching and more detailed scenario briefings on a couple of key items of interest. And of course, there are custom workshops in-house available if you'd like to take advantage of that. My name is Thomas Wittig, and I am the CEO of WITTIGONIA, and I will be leading the discussion today. The purpose of today's talk is to leave you with a better understanding of the dynamics that are involved in terms of migrating a customer base and safeguarding customers. So it's about advancing the system dynamics skills, which are more and more important, increasingly important for managers, project managers, and leaders, and also policy makers in large public organizations. We will explore the feedback structures and then take a look at how the behavior, the dynamic behavior, is impacting the performance and success, or in other words, the key performance indicators or KPIs over time. And then I will discuss a couple of key strategies and tactics and how they play out. And of course, there's more material available in the extended course. For the orientation, this is the roadmap for the summer briefing series. You can watch each topic as a standalone topic or join the entire roadmap. We are here now in week 5, and there is in week 10 an add-on or a sequel coming up for this topic. So I'm covering basically 2 cycles of these topics, ranging from strategy, product development, market dynamics, organizational dynamics, and so on. So what happens each week is a free webinar like this one, which takes about 30 to 45 minutes, including some Q&A time. And each webinar has a discount down offer for a special access to the extended course. So make sure that you sign up early to secure your seat at the best rates. And the replays of these live webinars will be made available also on the YouTube channel, typically on the same day when the webinar is airing. and also in the extended course documentation. And there is a Facebook group, so if you would like to ask questions or comment on some of the work, I'd be very happy to see your feedback and ask and answer also the questions. In the extended content and course, there are additional video briefings about key strategies and tactics, and of course group coaching. So when people have questions, I'd be happy to answer them and advise on a couple of general topics. And I have made some downloadable tools and templates available, plus some online simulations that you can use for working out your specific scenarios that you're thinking about. Today's topics. So first of all, I want to, let's say, explain in more detail what is the feedback structure that drives the dynamic behavior in a migration situation. And then we'll talk about some key challenges and typical failure modes that I have seen in different project settings. And then we'll talk about some key strategies. Yeah, so in a separate topic, we will cover the online flight simulator. Again, if you are joining this talk from the webinar site, only on the webinar site, there is the introduction offer for this round, and you will see the offer displayed on your right-hand side. So check it out. There's no risk involved. It has a 30-day money-back guarantee. So if you really don't like it, no question asked, get the money back. And here's basically how it works. This is the extended course site. It's on academy.wittigonia.com. Feel free also to check it out. So with these nice summer colors here, there are actually two courses. One is the general briefing, and the other one is the session that we're talking about. Okay, let's dive into the details. The areas of transformation that we are looking at range from the customer dynamics or customer success when we look from a company perspective in products and services. So there we looked at the dynamics of product development issues and the core structures that drive the typical delay and the schedule overruns. And I'm planning to do more on that topic because there was a lot of feedback coming and people wanted to know more about this. The last session, I talked more about internal organization dynamics because it is super important, of course, to rally the organization behind an innovation or a change initiative. And we talked about this from a system dynamics perspective, not from a, let's say, a psychology perspective from an organization point of view, but more from how the dynamics play out over time. And then there are other areas such as supply chain and market dynamics, where we also have some topics to talk about. This is the high-level feedback structure, I would say, that we are exploring. Today, we're focusing more on the, let's say, specifically zooming in on the customer-based dynamics. Last week, I talked more about the organizational dynamics, which impact, let's say, the development feedback loop, but also the sales and marketing feedback loops, which are really essential. But here we talk, of course, about customers. I mean, in an ideal scenario where we have customers and they talk favorably about our products, we also see word of mouth promotion. So this is indicated by this internal loop here. So now let's take a step forward. So you heard me talking about this basic chart here. So let's assume we have a product coming out of the development, and it's being released to the customer base. And in many organizations, we do have an existing customer base. So it's not that we are starting from new, but we might have hundreds, thousands, or 100,000s of clients that we want to safeguard to the new product that is coming out now. And so this is, of course, a matter of marketing and sales effort, but also what we now call customer success, which means our colleagues who are working with the clients and making sure that we are safeguarding them towards the new solution. So think about this, for example, that a company has developed a new cloud application and is moving from a traditional business model, which is more characterized by, let's say, license and maintenance pricing, and it's moving to a subscription-based model. That, of course, has some implications. So you need to move the customer. Sometimes you need to sell them on it. Most importantly, you need to make sure that their activities, their data, etc., are migrated. And again, we're not talking about a technology point of view, but more about a system dynamics point of view. Now, what management would like to see is for the existing customer base is that the customer base is migrating very quickly. And of course, that the adoption of the new solution is also happening very quickly. So that time window ideally should be fairly short. Now, the key challenges in transformation initiative, I think it really also boils down to this notion that migrating an existing customer base exposes the company also to a major risk. And the key challenges typically that I have seen is one, of course, the customers may not adopt the innovation or not adopt it right away. We see that with many technology solutions. So you have some early adopters, but let's say a larger share of the customer base is not willing to adopt it. Timing is a key issue. So launching too late may open a competitive window, and your competitors are basically taking your customers away. Resource availability, having the right people at the right time and place, or the partners also at the right time and place, is important. Then we'll also talk about leakage, so that is generating by losing customers, or churn as we call it in the marketing language. And of course, not understanding the dynamics. So what is happening when and how quickly are the changes coming? This is typically a matter of, let's say, forecasting that doesn't really reflect what is really happening and how the change is playing out over time. And then, of course, innovation means, if you have people, if you have to support people or your customers on the older product releases for a longer period of time, that is absorbing also a lot of capacity, and that is taking away from the ability to innovate. Now, this is something I took away from a discussion from one of my earlier bosses, a CEO of a very large international software company. And he asked me the question, he asked, Thomas, what is worse than having no customers? I was thinking about it. And then he said, well, it's having only one customer, because then you have to make sure that you're supporting this customer for a long period of time, but it absorbs also a lot of bandwidth and capacity. So that's something we need to keep in mind. So management usually has a keen interest on driving the migration swiftly forward. Now, what we are talking about here today is applicable in many areas. So while I'm predominantly talking about migration in the software service business, you can apply the same principles in other business organizations or public sector entities or in whole ecosystems and sales channels. And the types of innovation that we are discussing, they can be indeed new products and services or new software products or platforms, but it can also mean moving from a product to a service, or from a service to a product, or even a process and internal systems. So now let's ask the question, how does a migration really work out? And I'm asking this question from a system dynamics point of view. So we're not talking in terms of a technical data migration, for example. And let's step for a second and remind ourselves about the basic feedback structures. I talked about this briefly in one of the previous talks and webinars, but just as a short reminder. Let's say we can consider the customer base as a giant bathtub full of customers, and the number of customers is the sum of customers who ever joined our installed base minus those who ever left our installed base. And this seems to be a basic issue, but believe me, in a lot of proposals that I have seen, you can only see the left side. So people only winning customers, but they're not articulating how many customers they might be losing over time. The second important thing to remember here is that as managers, we can only influence the inflows or outflows. We cannot just say, okay, dear customers of the legacy product, now jump into the other bathtub, and then we declare a migration complete. No, it's actually a flow of customers who are migrating over time. And so in terms of some of the models that I was showing here in a minute, the taxonomy or the language about this, we call this a stock of customers, let's say, using our innovation, and we call this the flows. And the flows can be influenced by factors. For example, then an outflow is, in this case, influenced by the quality of our product. If the quality is not good, more customers are leaving. If they perceive the so-called cost of ownership too high, they might be leaving. If they run out of budget, they might be leaving, and so on. And likewise, these could also be factors for the inflow. And the feedback loop usually is articulated like this. So the more customers we have using our product and then they speak favorably, then this might create a word of mouth or positive or reinforcing feedback loops. But there might be also delays in place. So that's also a factor we have to take into account. And then likewise here, so this balancing feedback loop or negative feedback loop means that a fraction of our customers are leaving, and as more and more customers are leaving, the fraction of customers leaving is getting smaller and smaller. All right, so now it gets a bit more interesting and closer to the topic. Here I've prepared a simulation model, if you want, about a typical customer base. And it's a somewhat simplified model, but yet it's fairly coherent, which means that no customers is ever getting lost in this picture. So it works like this. Let's say we have a customer base of our legacy product. So all these customers use our current product. And then once the innovation is starting, we have some customers, or the customers start trying the product, and a portion of them may not be buying, but some of them will, of course, buy the product, and they become customers of our actual product. And again, some of them may not like it, so we will lose a portion of them. And then in the software as a service model world, it's very common that the contracts are being renewed. So it's based on a subscription model. So every 12 months or so, the contracts are expiring, and some customers may not renew, but hopefully a large portion of them will renew if we're doing a good job and paying attention to and adding innovation and keeping the quality high. So here we see 1 to 3 loss rates of our customer base. So that's what I meant earlier by the leakage along the way. And then these basically become lost customers who may not be accessible or addressable anymore, or who may become addressable after some period of time. For the sake of the discussion, we leave these two flows here unconsidered at the moment. Basically, that would mean that we have still customers coming into our old product, and then that we have customers leaving our old product. But for the sake of the, let's say, more simplified conversation here, we leave that. So now we talked a little bit about delays. Where do we have delays in the picture? Well, the most important ones are here. During the customers are trying the solution, there's a time they take to try it. So it's usually 2 weeks, a month, or 3 months, where you can check out the new product, and then eventually you are being convinced that this is great and you're going to buy it. Then the second one is here in the expiring. So typically after a period of 12 months, the contracts are expiring, and then you need to renew it or say that you don't want to renew it. And then once the customers are expired, in some businesses, it also takes a time until they make a move and renew their subscription. Now, the fractional loss rates that I talked before about, sorry, one step back here. These basically also determine the outflow of our customer base here. So here we have, let's say, the win-loss ratio So which means, let's say, a 50% chance of winning a customer means that these flows would be equally strong, right? Then the churn rate here means that this is the fraction of customers which are leaving our installed base. And here we have the fraction of customers renewing. Again, keep in mind, these two factors determine the renewal rate or the flow of renewing customers. So the fraction of the customers who are expired are renewing, and the time it takes until they respond to the renewal. Okay, so now the question is, how does the whole thing get into motion? Well, in order to motivate customers to move from here to there, we consider basically three activities. So one is we do some form of marketing, and then some form of selling or servicing the customer. It really depends on the type of businesses that we have. And the third area where we have an impact is the word of mouth. So WoM. Word of mouth basically means the more customers we have in our installed base, the more they motivate others to join. Now, this may be, let's say, more true in a highly networked world or in a consumer product, and maybe less true in let's say, business applications world. So let's take them one by one. So this is a representation of the service and sales staff. So in order to conduct some sales, we need to have sales staff. So how do we determine the sales staff? Well, basically, we have a number of customers that are available, and we have that determines basically how many sales people or personnel we would like to have. And then we apply some constraint, which gives us a number of salespeople that we would like to allocate. So we start to hire them, building up the salespeople, or if we have too many, we are decreasing them. So there, basically from there, we have a sales capacity, so the number of people or person month times their sales productivity, which gives us a rate of by which we are selling or servicing the people. So that gives us the first important flow. And now note that there are also some delays here, which we might not get to in this intro webinar to cover. Now, likewise, the marketing flow that we saw beforehand, how is this coming about? So first, we have a number of customers still in the with using our legacy product, and let's say we have a certain cost per customer, CPC, that it takes in order to win a customer, right? So that determines the amount of budget that we would like to allocate. Now, management might say, okay, we have a constraint. For example, in our model that we use today, we say 10% of the revenue is allocated to marketing budget. So that is a cap. And now that gives us an inflow of marketing budgets, and by the act of conducting marketing campaigns, we're spending the money, and then we basically initiate the marketing flow. So it's the amount of marketing budget we have times the cost per customer basically gives us a rate of customers flowing from A to B. Now, again, note that there are also delays involved, right, which can make this picture a little bit more dynamic than some of the managers would like to. So the word of mouth, and this is a formulation that I would like to briefly mention. If you're interested, there are a couple of other sessions where I talk more in detail about it. But it basically works like this. Word of mouth is basically a matter of how many people we have in our customer base, or in this case, also how many customers are trying. And then once they get in touch or in contact with our existing customer base, there is a chance that they will influence them. And this is determined by the number of contacts and the probability that these customers will also join the installed base. And that is giving us the flow, or determining the flow of customers trying our solution purely through word of mouth. Okay, so there are two important feedback loops here. So that basically means, or these two feedback loops mean, the more customers we have in here, the more likely it is that they will meet some of the existing customers, and that creates a positive or reinforcing feedback loop. Now, the balancing feedback loop, or we also call them the market saturation feedback loop, comes into play as this pool of customers is basically running out of steam. Then fewer and fewer customers are basically available. Okay, so that is the basic structure for word of mouth. Now, I don't discuss this in much detail here. But if you would like to know more about it, I talked a bit more in detail about this in the other two sessions in marketing or market dynamics and organizational dynamics, which you also find on the YouTube channel. Now, in terms of pricing, it's pretty straightforward. We have our subscription pricing and our initial purchase or service pricing. So the number of customers coming through and buying our product times the initial deal size or purchase price gives us the initial revenue, and the subscription price times the actual ongoing number of customers gives us the total revenue. So think about this, for example, as let's say dollars per month times the customers that are using the product gives us the recurring revenue. Now, a little side note here. This is actually probably the key difference from between the traditional business models and the modern or software as a service oriented business models, that we have a higher focus on let's say subscription revenue. So this is basically the main source of income, and it really also depends on the number of customers that are really actively using our product, and that's why there's a higher focus on customer loyalty than in some of the traditional models, which are more, I would characterize them more as transactional business models. So for example, in a classical ERP solution, you have let's say a license fee or list price, and then customers are typically paying somewhere between 15 to 22, or I've seen also 25% in terms of maintenance fees. Whereas in a subscription model, for example, take Microsoft Office, customers are paying a certain amount, let's say 12 or 20 bucks or something like that per month. So that's the key difference here. Now, as revenue is coming in, we can add, of course, more funds to our budget, and we are depleting the budget by spending this. So through sales spending, which is dependent on the number of people we hire, and also the marketing spending. Now, okay, so much about the underlying structures. So I know this was a little bit drinking from the fire hose. So if it was too fast, you can always go back and rewind to the session later or review it. But now I want to go ahead and show a base case scenario. So not to read the whole slide here, but maybe the key points to note is that we have a customer base of 100,000 customers. And in this scenario, we're capping our expenses at 10% of revenue. So which means that 10% of the revenue goes into marketing expenses, and 10% goes also into sales headcount and sales personnel that we want to hire. And here you see some of the other parameters. So the pricing is fairly similar, so that it basically maps out over time. Okay, now what happens now in this scenario is that I call this the base case or baseline scenario, that here in month 12, when we start selling and promoting the new solution, our customer base is coming down gradually. You see that there's a little bit of a curve here, so it's not exactly straight line. And during the time, we have a number of customers trying this solution. So that is this little mountain over here. And then they become active customers. But also after some time, the active customers are a subject of renewal, actually. And so we have a constant flow into this bucket of renewing customers. That's why we see this little gap here. It's actually not exactly correct here, so this would actually start a little bit later, but for the purpose of this simplified simulation, I have modeled it this way. Now, what happens on the sales and marketing side is, as we start our sales efforts, we are let's say, hiring people. So that takes some time because we have a hiring delay. And then our budget cap kicks in. So we keep the sales headcount fairly flat. And the same happens to marketing, which is fairly realistic in most organizations. So you cannot grow sales and marketing through the roof. But interestingly, what also happens, the word of mouth marketing in this scenario also plays out very well. So that is actually kicking in a little bit later here. Again, keep in mind that first we have to have some customers in our new customer base before word of mouth can actually start materializing. And that is quite a different order of magnitude. Now, the order of magnitude of the curves really depend, of course, on the case-by-case scenario. And here my assumptions that I put in the model is that the customers have on average 10 contacts per month, and I believe there's a 3% probability that the contacts will also purchase. So here are some details. The sales staff, and we see here, for example, that we hire up to 40 people for quite some period of time until the sales staff or the service staff can be wound down again. And the same is true for marketing budget. So as the pool of potential customers is depleted, our marketing budget is then going down again. And this is the picture on the revenue side. So since we have selected fairly similar values, basically what happens is that the revenue is also migrating. And keep in mind, this gap here is because we have a number of customers or fraction of the customers being in a renewal situation. So which means their contract expired, we're not collecting revenues from them, and we're waiting for them to renew. And again, this is also, of course, different business by business. Now, to put this together again in a little bit of a dashboard format, so that we can compare a couple of KPIs at the same time, we have here the customer base migration, then the active customers or lost customers. Now, in our base case scenario, we did assume that there's no churn and we don't lose any customers. So we'll change that in a moment. And we have here our customer base development, revenue, and also the calculated profitability. And you see here that we have quite a substantial period of time when we have, let's say, a decline in our profitability. And of course, as managers, we need to be interested in reducing this gap and also making sure that we have not too much of an exposure in terms of the profitability impact. Now, what are the success factors for the migration? Let's skip forward here to a couple of scenarios. So what I have done here is modeled a business where we have no word of mouth. In other words, where we have a linear growth model, which means we have to take the customers one by one, and none of the customers is coming through word of mouth. And as we would expect, first of all, we have a very linear model. So we're lacking here this nice S-shaped growth curve, which is good to have in the business. But in this scenario, it's a fairly straight line. And you can also see that this transition takes considerably longer. And we have much more exposure in terms of the profitability. And of course, it requires more resources. So that's why we see, of course, the impact, the unfavorable impact on profitability. In this scenario, we're looking at the following. We're looking at a bit more of a realistic scenario. So we assume that we have a 90% win-loss ratio, a 1% churn per month, that is, of course, and a 95% renewal rate, which is fairly common for many, many business. And then you see what is actually happening to our customer base. So as the pool of customers, again, is depleted, so that's not a big difference, we see a decline in our customer base. Again, keep in mind the green line is all the customers combined. So it's the existing customers, the red line, plus the new customers, or let's say customers on the new solution. And there you see already that we have some exposure. And once we have migrated the entire installed base, we also see a decline because we have a certain loss or leakage from the installed base. And this is the complete picture for that simulation. And here you can see actually that we have also quite a substantial profitability impact. But probably the most important thing is that we're starting to lose customers. So as the churn is kicking in, pretty much starting here right from the outset here, we are constantly losing customers. So we would be well advised to pay attention to the churn there as well. In this scenario, what I have done is only modeled 2 delays. And the first one is a 3-month trial period and then a 2 months renewal time. So it takes the business on average 2 months to renew a customer. And probably the most notable change here is that we see this kind of a dip. And this is caused by the pool of customers who are trying this solution and not yet buying is growing. And you see that here actually in the customer base, where we have a more accentuated growth of the customers who are trying the solution. All the other things are pretty much equal. And now, of course, we have in many businesses a combined effect. And so that is shown here. So the delays plus the churn rates. And that gives us actually a more realistic picture what management usually has to cope with. So we have here again our 100,000 customers. And not only are we going to, let's say, a dip here, and then once we have migrated the installed base, we even see a further decline. So you see that this is a non-linear migration here. And then, of course, we see here that we have an increasing number of customers that we are actually losing. In this scenario, at some point in time, so at the end of the 5 years, that is, so 60 months, we have actually lost more customers than we have still in our installed base. And you see quite a substantial drop here in our profitability. So that can be a huge problem. Now, really the failure modes, what it comes down to when we talk about migration challenges or projects, first and foremost, I would call out the quality. So quality of the product is usually the most important key driver why people are not adopting the solution. It's a mixture between functionality, pricing, and so on. And then, of course, we have different churn factors. So customers leaving during the trial, during the contract period, or they're not coming back during the renewal period. So these are the 3 most important drivers that we need to understand. And then, of course, the resource availability. Now, we have not modeled yet what it means if we don't have people available, and if, for example, it doesn't take 1 month to adjust our capacity, but 2 or 3 months, as it's also common in some markets. That is a different discussion. I leave that for the extended course, of course. And then, of course, the renewal of the subscription is also a key point. So the delays until people renew their subscription. Now, again, so what could be done from a purely operational perspective? And let's say we have our product, our new product is what it is. What can we do? So here are a couple of considerations. First, we could reduce the trial time. Of course, a too short trial time is also not helpful because customers need to have some time to experience the new product and check it out at their own time and pace. Secondly, the automatic renewal of subscription. So we can simply set it up and say, you know, when the customers are accepting terms and conditions, they are automatically renewing year after year. And many businesses have gone towards this kind of model. Third, we could do pre-sales activities and start the pre-selling and pre-marketing even way before the product is available. And you see, that one example of doing that is, for example, running beta tests. And basically what it does is it starts the engine and the word of mouth feedback loops before actually the product is in the market. So that's an important one. And then we could relax our budget constraints. Now, I want to caution that individual results, of course, may vary, and some businesses may not be able to do all of these. But let's see what happens. If we deploy these solutions, basically what happens is that we're not only moving the curve up, so the peak of customers is much higher, so we actually have more customers in our customer base, but the peak is coming much earlier, so which means that we have reduced the time it takes in order to capture a larger market share or moving a larger share of the installed base. And the same is true and here I have shown the percentage or fraction of customers on the new platform. So we significantly move that percentage here. So by that time, in the traditional model where we have started the activities, we could have already a fraction of the customers on the new business model. Now, interestingly, also the financial impact is different. While we are actually, let's say, depleting our pool of existing customers earlier, in the long run, we may have more customers available over time. And the impact on profitability is quite interesting because we have moved the, let's say, the total exposure, we have reduced that here from a negative profitability impact to a still slightly positive, but also we reduced the gap quite significantly between these two curves and moved the profitability even up. And that is because we can retain business customers longer in the installed base. Okay, so these were, let's say, some of the basics purely from an operational perspective. Of course, there are other levers. And what I would call out first and foremost is product quality. This is probably the strongest lever that you have in the whole picture here. So if the product quality is good, then usually everything else is moving along quite nicely. If product quality is not good, then the issues usually multiply. Then secondly, customer feedback is really important to collect that through surveys, but also what I call in-product insights, which is very common now, to build that into the product. And the third point is to conduct systematic improvement projects. So once you detect that you have a churn problem, then it's important to go after this churn reduction in a very systematic way. For example, through systematic Six Sigma projects where you can cut down these so-called defects fairly quickly. And of course, in the marketing side of the equation, we should look at how we can leverage the word of mouth feedback loops, because these are very strong levers that we can pull. And of course, how can we make our product and the business model, the context, more sticky for customers, so that they are, let's say, their switching costs are higher and then they have less incentive to move to another solution. Okay, so let me come to the conclusions for this webinar for today. So first of all, as we've seen, the customer base migration is a complex challenge, and I have seen that in many companies that managers are struggling with this topic because on one hand they want to do a great job in providing great customer support and driving loyalty. On the other hand, they need to move the installed base or the user base towards a new solution. And the longer it takes, the more capital and the more resources it actually absorbs. Now, the feedback structures which are in play generate typically a nonlinear behavior. Only in very rare cases can you say, okay, the migration is happening in a very straight line. And therefore, organizations should focus on risk mitigation in a proactive and also in a reactive manner. And generally, it's easier to retain customers than to win new customers. So that should, let's say, put a high emphasis on securing and safeguarding the customer base. Here are a couple of things. I will not read all of them, but you should start early with promoting this new solution, drive for resource readiness, and improve the churn factors very early on. That's super important, because if you start with that too late, you're basically already on the wrong track. Now, optimizing the trial time is a key issue, and there the marketing team is also playing a key role to figure out what is an ideal trial time. What I mean here by the true drivers of churn, so understanding the true drivers, that is basically a special topic that I would like to dive in maybe in our next round, because it is an art in itself to identify what are really the true drivers which determine why people are leaving or why they are satisfied or less satisfied. And that is a special topic which I think deserves a little bit more space here. Now, of course, there's a key dependency, and once you put a team together in terms of migrating a customer base, it always should include people from the product side, marketing side, operations, customer success, and sales, of course. And then I can only encourage you to play and plan out the scenarios with proactive measures and also some competitive responses, because once you are migrating a customer base, you are opening the company to competitive attacks. So it's really important to understand what could happen and how to respond, or how you might use that tactics against your peer companies. More about this in the extended module. So if you're interested, join the online briefing and coaching program. There's more stuff available. And only for people attending the webinar, the live webinar, there's then a special intro offer displayed. If you want to check out the curriculum, it's on academy.wittigonia.com. All right, so I think that is it for today. I will check if there are a couple of live questions coming in our webinar today. Otherwise, I will take some of the pre-submitted questions which were submitted. Again, if you sign up for the seminar, you can also pre-submit questions, which I'm happy to take. And maybe I start there. So there was one of the first question, which was about what should we do, or what is the recommendation if you are, let's say, midstream with a migration project and it doesn't work out. Now, that's of course a very difficult question to answer. I have no generic answer for that, other than let's take a look at it piece by piece and figure out what is happening there. So the way I work, and I might actually show something like that as a case study in the course, is to take a look at what is happening, and then I use such a model that we have discussed here today, and I calibrate the model to the real data. And then we can see fairly quickly where the issue is located. And oftentimes it's a combination of different issues. So there's a challenge in the management system, that some of the decisions are taking too long and resource allocation is not happening quickly, or that there are some hidden factors in terms of churn. So we can identify that fairly quickly usually. And then, of course, it's important to take the action and drive some improvement programs around it. Okay, so there's one question here from participants about the time it takes. Now, the time it takes really for a migration initiative, of course, depends on the total number of customers you have your installed base, and really the rate by which you can move customers along. As I have shown here, there were 3 major rates. So basically the push from marketing or service, or your customer success team, we call it now, or marketing team, and then word of mouth. So the more you can engage positive word of mouth, and people are moving actively and in an automated way or self-service way, that's of course desirable, because then it doesn't take too much of your resources. But the time it takes, it's really a matter of the not only of the total number of people in the installed base, but of the inherent dynamics that are behind it. So I have seen, let's say, smaller customer bases which took forever to migrate, and I have seen very large customer bases of hundreds of millions that were migrating in a fairly short period of time. Yeah. If you have, for example, a business model where you have, let's say, very high network effects, let's say in the mobile phone business, for example, or in other areas, then you can see usually that there's a very rapid uptake, and the S-shaped growth curves are happening fairly quickly. So again, that's something that we can model and figure out before we actually go into the field and conduct the change. Okay, I would leave it at that for today. As always, you're welcome to ask questions in the Facebook group and other means. And I'm looking very much forward to having you in the next sessions and also the next iterations. As I mentioned before, there will be another iteration of migration dynamics where I'm planning to talk a little bit more about the details of churn and retention, the key topic of keeping your customers. Until then, I wish you all the best and good luck with your specific migration initiative. See you soon. Bye-bye.